Hey everyone, welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. We are going to have so much fun tonight. We're still in the book of Revelation, of course, and we're in chapter 21. There's a lot of gems in this chapter. That's why we're taking our time because, we could just rush through it, but there's so much detail. There's so much that we need to talk about, and that's why we're slowing down when we get here to the end of the chapter and the end of the book. Because, we could have spent a whole lot more time in this book, quite frankly. But hey, we're going to dig into Revelation 21, and we're asking the question, where in the world did the temple go? Because there was a temple there, and, well, then it seems like it kind of disappeared. So what do you say, Scott? Shall we dig in and just get into our text tonight?
Sure, because I'll let you
All right.
opine on this
Well,
first.
where shall we start? How about we go
Wherever you
over
want
to...
to.
We'll start with, of course, our text that is written. I did not see a sanctuary in it because the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb are its sanctuary. All right. So what are we talking about? Well, of course, we're talking about the New Jerusalem, and we're talking about the temple or the lack of the temple therein. There's just three problems, three passages in the book of Revelation that very clearly talk about this place that is in the temple. So let's cruise over to Revelation chapter 3. And what does Jesus say? He says that those who keep the word, that he will become a pillar in the sanctuary of my God, and he will never go out again, where I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem. Well, that sure sounds like it's talking about some place. Okay, we have another reference here. Not so much in this passage, but if we go to Revelation chapter 11, where we got to talk about the two witnesses, that was quite fun. All right, and we have these God's sanctuary in heaven was open, and the ark of his covenant appeared in his sanctuary. There were flashes of lightnings, rumblings of thunder, an earthquake, and severe hail. And then we go over to Revelation 15, and we have the same thing. After this, I looked in the heavenly sanctuary, the tabernacle of testimony was opened. All right. And the sanctuary was filled with smoke from God's glory and his power. No one could enter the sanctuary until the seven plagues of the seven angels were completed. Now, so that's what we have in the book of Revelation. And then if we cruise back over to Isaiah chapter 6, and the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted, seated on a high and lifted lofty throne. His robe filled the temple, right? So there he is in his temple. Right. So we have a pretty good composite of God in the temple. And of course, as far as we can tell, God is in the New Jerusalem. So there is a temple in Jerusalem, in the New Jerusalem currently. But when it comes down to planet Earth, there will no longer be a temple there. And so I'm wondering what in the world happened to it. And I would suggest that Zechariah chapter 6 is where we actually find that answer. All right. So let's cruise over to Zechariah chapter 6. And there we find talking about the Lord who's going to build the temple. You are to tell him, this is what the Lord of hosts says. Here is a man whose name is Branch. That's so. He will branch out from his place and build the Lord's temple. He will build the Lord's temple. He'll be clothed in splendor, and he will sit on his throne and rule. There will also be a priest on his throne, and there will be peaceful counsel between the two of them. Well, so there we have it. So again, what I was discovering as I was, putting all these things together, this was like, I don't know, between 10 and 14 years ago. Time's flying. Gosh, it's 2026. And it was probably like 2011 to 2014, I was really digging deep into a lot of this stuff. And I was writing my book, this guy. I'm going to put a new cover on this guy pretty soon. But the Millennium Chronicles, I was looking at this and really trying to understand it. And I kept just hitting this wall. I was like, it doesn't work the way that I had been taught with the dispensational timing, that the New Jerusalem comes down after the 1,000 years, after the new heavens and earth have been established, after the 1,000 years, of course. I'm like, it just doesn't work. There's so many more details in the book of Ezekiel when it talks about the river of life and the tree of life, and then you compare that. We'll get to that in the next chapter, of course. But you start looking at all these different things, and of course, Isaiah 65 and 66. I was like, it's just not working. And so when I realized that the New Jerusalem has already been on planet Earth, that happened before the fall. That's where Satan was stationed. And he was also in the Garden of Eden. And then the temple in the New Jerusalem, according to what we see in Revelation 3, 11, and 15, it seems that it is a temporary measure, a temporary box, if you will, that God decided to put himself into. The reason being, God is fire. He's a consuming fire. And no mortal can see his face and live. Not because God is stuck up, not because God is, I'm just too good for you guys. No, he is. But he's too powerful for us. He's got way too much energy. And I think what he did is he became little David, the boy in the bubble. Back in the 60s or 70s, there was a little boy who had an autoimmune deficiency. It wasn't called AIDS back then, and it was more severe than AIDS, but it was some type of that. And so they put him in a plastic bubble. Imagine you're his mother or his father, and your little boy is in this plastic bubble, and you just want to hug him and kiss him, because that's what you do with your kids. And you know that if you go in there, you're likely to kill him. And so they had to, the only way they could interact with him was through a plastic bubble. That's the picture that I get, is that God has put himself in the bubble, not for his sake, but for our sake. He doesn't want to kill us because of our weakened frame, because we are made of dust, and we will return to the dust really quickly if we happen to encounter God in this body in all of his glory. And so he put himself in a container called the temple, the tabernacle, the sanctuary, where he's contained, and we can then come to him nowadays through Christ. But before Yeshua came, we had access to him through the blood sacrifices, through the Levitical system, through the tabernacle system. But even before that, before the Levites, he was going to have an entire nation full of priests. And of course, that didn't work out because they went after the golden calf, etc. So I don't know. That's how I'm seeing it. That's how I think that the New Jerusalem had a temple. It currently has a temple, and in the age to come, when the New Jerusalem sits down on planet Earth, the temple will no longer be there. I think it will be moved. I think Jesus is going to take it, and he's going to move it to planet Earth. And it's not even a big deal for him. If we can move London Bridge, I literally went to London Bridge years ago. I went to Lake Havasu in Arizona. Boy, talk about hot. And they're like, hey, this is London Bridge. And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. You got Brooklyn Bridge here, too. I thought they were pulling my leg. But no, they really did. They transferred, I don't know if it was the London Bridge, but it was a bridge from London. Let's just say that the Brits actually sold stone by stone. They put it on a ship, and they shipped it over to Arizona, Lake Havasu, of all places. And they built it right there. So if humans can do that, I'm sure Jesus can move a temple without any issues.
So are you saying Where do you see the Ezekiel temple being? Uh, Outside of New Jerusalem?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Like in the vicinity thereof?
In the vicinity. Yeah.
But a place where the nations can go, those that are not in glorified bodies, that can't
Right.
enter into the New Jerusalem, where they would turn into crispy critters, is your
Exactly.
understanding?
Yes. Yeah. And that's, I think, solves the whole problem, because when we get to Revelation 22, and it says that outside of the New Jerusalem are the dogs and sorcerers and liars and all that, and they cannot go into the New Jerusalem. Only those who wash their garments, and then they have the leaves of the tree of life, can actually go into the New Jerusalem. So you have a whole class of people that are outside. They have the potential to go in if they want to, if they will give their lives to Jesus, if they will bend the knee and they will confess him as their king, and then they can take of the river of life and be cleansed. They can take of the trees, the leaves of the tree of life, and be healed. But some are going to opt not to do that.
Well,
I mean, it
and I
seems
think
crazy,
that's
but that's what it says. Yeah.
well, that's the strongest argument that I see as far as why the New Jerusalem has to be in this time domain age, even if it's the next stage, the seventh day, the millennium, because it appears to me that at the end of that age, there's not going to be any liars or dogs or sorcerers that go into the eternal state. And
Right.
so
Yep.
that's why that's a verse that should be problematic for people that adhere to that understanding. Or I'd
Yeah.
like to understand. I'd like to hear the explanation for it. I mean, how they're, is it? I could see how someone could argue that, oh, these are those that burned up in the, they're in the lake of fire, they're destroyed in the lake of fire, the second death, and therefore, they're not allowed in because they're not around anymore. That's about the only
Mm,
argument I can think of that a person could make,
right.
unless you have people entering into the eternal, whatever happens after the great white throne judgment, which I call the eighth day or the eternal state.
Yeah. Well, I think the most enjoyable part is for us to just take a little tour. I always like to let the text speak, because then we don't get too far afield. And all right, so here in Ezekiel 47. So speaking of this temple, right, the one that I believe is currently in the New Jerusalem and will be moved by Jesus himself, then he brought me back to the entrance of the temple, and there was water flowing from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was coming down from under the south side of the threshold of the temple, south of the altar. Next, he brought me out by way of the north gate and led me around the outside of the outer gate that faced east. There, the water was trickling from the south side. And, they go on, and it gets deeper and deeper. And this is an amazing river. And then we see it says, and I returned, I saw a number of trees along both sides of the riverbank. He said, this water flows out to the eastern region and goes down to the Arabah. When it enters the sea, that is the Dead Sea, the sea of foul water, the water of the sea becomes fresh. Every kind of living creature that swarms will live wherever the river flows, and there will be a huge number of fish because this water goes there. Since the water will become fresh, there will be life everywhere the river goes. And you got fishermen doing some really cool stuff. Apparently, for some reason, swamps and marshes are not going to be healed. They'll be left for salt.
Because they'll be left for the salt.
They need salt. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? And there's all kinds of trees providing food will grow along both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, and their fruit will not fail. Each month, they will bear fresh fruit because the water comes from the sanctuary. Their fruit will be used for food, and their leaves for medicine. I mean, we have to go to Revelation 22 at this point, because it's identical. Of life, of living water, which is moving water, sparkling like crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb down the middle of the broad street of the city. The tree of life was on both sides of the river, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit every month. the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations, and there will be no longer any curse. The throne of God and the Lamb will be in the city, and his slaves will serve him. That's what this translation says. But so, right there, what I am seeing is that you have you've got the New Jerusalem, right? It's gigantic. It's not crazy big like we were taught. It's not 1,400 miles high. I take it as the shape. I divide the 8 edges of a pyramid into 1,400 miles. That gives us about 193 miles on each side, roughly. And so still huge, 30 times higher than Mount Everest. And then,
big.
All right, so this thing is gigantic, and it's probably not like a pyramid that comes to an absolute peak, but it's probably truncated. And then God himself is the capstone, right? He's the one sitting on top of it. I don't know how big he will be in relationship to his city. He could be as big as he wanted to be, obviously, because nothing can contain God. But however he decides to manifest himself is obviously up to him, right? But he will be there. That's where he'll be enthroned. His light is at the top of this city, and it's like translucent gold. Okay, so his light is going to fill everything. So you're probably going to have living spaces on the outside, living spaces on the inside. That's speculation, but that's just how I can see it. You got to put people somewhere, and then this water that's coming out from his throne, if it's now a mountainous kind of a stepped pyramid ziggurat kind of shape, the water is flowing down, right? That's what water, it still does the same basic laws of physics that we understand. Okay, there's still gravity, right? So water still travels down, right? It's going to travel down on the sides of this, and then the millennial temple will be on one of those sides, and then the water, as it's coming down, it will then go under the threshold of the temple, and then it will go under the threshold, and then it will make its way and keep going down to the Dead Sea. And so it's that water that's coming from God is then going to replenish the earth. It's going to transform the earth. And where exactly these trees are that the nations can take of and they can be transformed, are they everywhere? Are they just in this proximity? We're not told. That's one of the challenges. But certainly within this general space, there are these trees, and the people from the nations can take the leaves and they can be transformed. Once they do that, then they can go into the New Jerusalem through the gates, is what we're told in Revelation chapter 22. So let me just share my screen again. And so Revelation 22, he says, "Blessed are those who wash their robes, so that they might have the right to the tree of life and may enter the city by the gates." Right there it is. Okay, outside of the dog, sorcerer, sexually immoral, the murderers, idolaters, and everyone who loves and practices lying. Okay, so if you have not taken, or you've not washed your robes, okay, and you've not taken of the tree of life, you cannot go into the city through the gates. That is just not going to happen. And we're told at the end of Revelation 21 that no unclean thing can enter into the New Jerusalem. All right, we're told here that the nations will walk in its light. The kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. Each day its gates will never close, because it will never be night there. They will bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. Nothing profane will ever enter it. No one who does what is vile or false, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. All right. So, and I see if you to be in the book of life, you need to have taken of the tree of life. That's going to transform you. It's interesting. In genetics, they actually talk about the book of life, and it's not some book somewhere. The book of life is actually our DNA, and which is a fascinating idea. And I don't know if they got this right or wrong, biblically speaking, but it is fascinating to think about it, how the tree of life, when you're written in the Lamb's book of life, it could be that you have now perfected DNA, And that is why you can go into the temple, and you can go into the New Jerusalem. You can be in God's presence because you're no longer carrying any kind of corruption in your body, in your DNA, in your cells. You are completely 100% restored, and you are completely compatible with God.
So it
And
would be sort of like Adam prior to the fall, because there's
well,
no
yeah,
curse.
right.
So again, I believe there will be a curse for those that don't repent, don't
Yeah,
wash their robes, don't partake of the tree of life. There's going to be a choice to make still.
absolutely. Yes. And here's the thing, what I think is really beautiful about this is it's the same basic thing that we have to do, right? We have to accept Jesus as our Lord and Savior. I know that's really Baptist kind of language, but it's the boiling down of what we're talking about. Are you acknowledging the rightful king as the rightful king? Are you living in right relationship to his laws, to his ordinances? Are you loving your neighbor as yourself? Are you loving God with all your heart, soul, and strength? That's essentially what we're talking about. And so in that age, somebody will still have to make that decision. The only difference is it's not that you're going to go to church and you're going to come forward and respond to the altar call. No, in this case, you have to go up to Jerusalem. You have to partake in the feast, right? We see that in Zechariah chapter 14, right? Zechariah 14, it talks about those who will
If they won't
not be
reign,
willing, right? It'll be, so we have here, it'll be a day known only to Yehovah without day or night, and there'll be light at evening. On that day, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half of it toward the eastern sea and the other half toward the western sea, and somewhere in Lake Winter. So we just saw that, right? On that day, Yahweh will become king over all the earth, Yahweh alone and his name alone. All the land of Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, will be changed into a plain, but Jerusalem will be raised up and will remain on its side from the Benjamin gate to the place of the first gate, to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the royal wine presses. People will live there, and never again will there be a curse of complete destruction. So Jerusalem will dwell in safety. Okay, Jerusalem will also fight, and the survivors of the nations that will come against Jerusalem will go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to celebrate the festival of Booths, or the festival of Sukkot. Should any of the families of the earth not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, rain will not fall on them. And if the people of Egypt do not go up and enter, then rain will not fall on them. This will be the plague the Lord inflicts on the nations who do not go up to celebrate the festival of booths. Okay, so you have to go and celebrate these festivals. No one's putting a gun to your head, but if you don't, rain doesn't come on you. Now, it's interesting. Is it going to be instantaneous? Like, that there were rain clouds coming, and then we're like, well, we're not going. And so they're like, okay, cancel the rain clouds. Or, is this more of kind of a buildup? Maybe the first year you still get rain. The second year you still get rain because God is gracious. God is kind. But maybe by the 10th or the 50th year, who knows? Suddenly there's not any more rain coming, which is an interesting concept, So there's so many aspects that come to trying to understand the millennium and the age to come. I wish we had a few more dots so that we could connect them a little better, but God gave us what he gave us,
yeah.
and he figured it's enough.
And again, this is let's pull that up real quick. This is one of those that Ed did a teaching on is Yeshua God, is Yeshua Yod Hey Vav Hey, and this would be an example of how you can actually read and study through the prophets and deny Yeshua is Yah is beyond me, off topic. But then all the survivors will come up against Jerusalem, will go up year after year to worship the King. Who is the King of Kings? It's Yeshua. And so I am flabbergasted at the number. Like, Ed's got he does the Shabbat teaching and does it live. I think the majority were in the Yeshua is a lesser created sun god camp, and definitely the comments on his YouTube video. And
Wow.
I think it's a spirit of Antichrist, and to a certain extent,
Yeah.
you're taking Yeshua off the throne and relegating him to just an agent of Yah,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
his express image representation. I mean, you read
Right.
passages like this and compare these passages to what's stated. Who is everybody going to worship? They're
Well,
going
and
to
let's
be
just go back to
worshiping the king.
the top of the chapter. A day of the Lord is coming when you plunder, your plunder will be divided. Okay. And it says
And
right
who's
here,
coming?
the Lord will go out to fight against those nations as he fights on the day of battle.
That's Yeshua.
On the day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. Okay. Like who in the world is it? God the Father who's coming to stand on the Mount of Olives, or is it Jesus, the Messiah, the Son, who is also Yehovah? Right. I mean, there's so many passages like this that talk about how God himself is going to be with us. God is going to lead us. Right. We
This
have
is
this in Revelation chapter 7 that,
verse 5. Verse 5. Then Yah, my Elohim, will come, and all the holy ones with him. Well, what do those newer passages say? It's Yeshua returning with all
Yeah.
his holy ones with him. I mean, there's surely somebody's done this, probably in the Christian world, more from a Trinitarian standpoint. But if you just made all the comparisons, like the Rock, Redeemer, Savior, King, and you just compared passages like this, like in Zechariah, Paul is and John are not revealing anything new in Thessalonians and Revelation. Yeshua is really not talking about much new in Matthew 24. So I believe those that knew their scriptures and know their scriptures now you're not going to see a lot of new information in the Gospels or Revelation as far as how things will be fulfilled at his second coming. We don't know the exact order. I mean, we can debate that until the cows come home, but it will be fulfilled, even if it's different than how we understand it today. So.
Yeah, and God gave us at least a pretty good framework, right? We don't know all the details, but we may not know what color the walls are going to be, but we certainly know the structure of the house. Like that's what he's given us, and we should stand on that. And it is amazing how many people are falling into the same old heresies as the beginning, when people were denying that Jesus was God. And you're like, well, haven't we already settled the Arian heresy? Haven't we already done that? I mean, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's nothing new. It's just the same old heresy, just repackaged. And what is very disturbing, though, is so many Hebrew roots messianic types are now falling into this same nasty heresy. And I'm like, we had a guy come to our church 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. And it seemed like just a really nice young man. I was like, oh, cool, he's going to come to our church. I was excited. He's like, oh, I'd love to, but you guys wouldn't like me. I'm like, well, why not? He's like, oh, well, I just see things differently, and so we sat down and we talked, and he was already adamant about Jesus is not God. And I thought, you know what, I could try to convince him, but he's already convinced.
Good luck.
He already knows everything there is to know about this. And I thought, I'm not going to change his opinion. When he's ready, he'll come back.
They won't ever answer questions directly, like
right.
when I present them. Again, I'm not saying Yeshua is the Father. I mean, I believe that just like Doug, you cannot see into my soul right now, and you cannot see my spirit, which comes from Yah. Everybody living and breathing has the spirit of Yah, and it's even an animal has that spirit that's giving life. Not necessarily a born again, indwelt, but it's the spirit that gives life. But you can't see it,
right?
And these words I'm saying are not they're my words, Scott Harwell's words. I'm not three people. And why that's just a simple little analogy. Yeshua is the word of Yah. The word made flesh. The word was with God, and the word was God, not brackets A like the Jehovah's Witnesses do. and like those that are now promoting this agency nonsense and this. I mean, again, I just say, look, I will give you that scripture says he's the only begotten. I'll give you where it's talked about he's brought forth. I said, now, if you want to apply a literal hermeneutic, you're turning the Father God into a hermaphrodite who had sex with himself, has a uterus, and literally birthed a sun god. I said, okay, so if you're trying to go with physical, you've got a Father God with a body birthing a son. And that just, as opposed to bringing forth, like I'm bringing forth now air from my lungs out. I'm bringing forth words from my mind and consciousness and things that no one can see. I mean, you could take my head part and look at the brain and everything, but you can't see my thoughts. You can't see into my spirit. And I believe we're made in his image. And we're kind of a 3-part creature too: mind, soul, spirit.
Right. Yeah, so. Absolutely. Yeah. So a few questions here. Who was the priest? Who was the priest in Eden? I would say it was actually Satan. That would be my take on that. That he was the priest. So if we go to Ezekiel chapter 28, son of man, lament for the king of Tyre. Say to him, this is what the Lord God says: you were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone covered you: carnelian, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, turquoise, emerald. Your mountings and settings were crafted in gold. They were prepared on the day you were created. So if you look at the Septuagint, I know this gets a little textual here, but the Septuagint actually has 12 stones, and those correspond with the stones that are on the breastplate of the high priest. And so I think that Satan was in fact the high priest that was supposed to represent God to man and man to God.
Is verse 14, is that anointed? Is that Mashiach? You were anointed.
Yep. Mimshach. That's right. Yep. At kuv mimshach. Yep. You are the anointed one who covers, right? The anointed cherub who covers. And
he was on the holy mountain of Elohim. And he was even walking among the fiery stones. That pull that up. Go back one screen, and I want to show that verse real quick. Go down one to 15. And this is what I want to point out to the polytheists. Satan was barad, created. I don't do Hebrew, but I do know that word created there is bara. Doug probably pronounces it better. And so they're essentially, you almost get in this, Jesus is just a little notch above Satan. They're brothers or something.
Right.
So, but no, Satan was not begotten or brought forth out of Yah or from Yah. He was actually a created entity.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so he was created. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and the Hebrew gets a little dicey, or at least the English translation does. Through the abundance of your trade, you were filled with violence and you sinned. So I expelled you in grace from the mountain of God and banished you, guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. All right. So this word here, again, this is 14 years ago. I was staring at all this stuff and I'm like, what the heck's going on here? What do you mean the abundance of your trade? And I kept coming back to this word, rechulatcha, and this is the same word as rakil, which means to slander, right? To slander. A rakil is someone who slanders. It's related to resh gimel lamed, which is a leg, right? What do you do with your legs? Well, you walk around with your legs, okay? So the rakil, the slanderer, was somebody who would go around back and forth. And what do you do when you're going back and forth? Well, you're telling tall tales, okay? You're gossiping. You are murmuring stuff about other people. You go from this house to this house, and you say, "Did you hear what Sally did?" "No, I didn't hear it. Please tell me." All right, and that is what I think is really the emphasis here. It's not so much trading, like trading goods. Well, what the heck would Satan trade anyway? It just doesn't make sense. And then again, there's some people.
Maybe he was the first prosperity preacher.
Right.
We do know he sold Eve a lie.
That's true. That is true. And she bought it. Yeah. Well, there's some people that say, oh, this is only talking about an earthly king. No, it's not. The king that was in perspective here was the king of the underworld. That's who we're talking about. The king of the underworld is the one, the king of the city, the one that they had in mind. And then the city was the underworld, the netherworld. That was what was happening. So anyway, this, Satan was a high priest, and it was through his slanderings that he became filled with violence. His slanderings, which tells you that God allowed him to slander more than once. Right? He slandered a number of times, and then it finally culminated when he was there in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were not freaking out. Oh no, it's a talking snake. No, they knew this being. He was not human, obviously. He was not humanoid. He was cheruboid.
He's a reptilian.
Right? He's this guardian cherub. He's got like 4 different kinds of faces. He's an awesome, majestic creature. He's got 6 wings. Wow, he's impressive. Okay. And he is the perfection of beauty, right? We often think of, the human body as the perfection, and it is beautiful, but this creature would take your breath away. You're like, oh, wow, this guy is amazing. Okay. And he shows up in the garden, and they're like, oh, hey, we know him. This is, Enlil, whatever his name was, guardian cherub. And he's like, oh, hey, did you know? Right. And they're like, oh, this apple. Okay. Crunch. And we know the rest from there. So it's all right here. He was in the garden. He was on the holy mountain, etc. So I think you had another.
Let's see. We got a question here. Hebrews 9:27 speaks to all men appointed to die once and then the judgment. Those who are alive when the resurrections happen, will they die during the 7th day and then another resurrection? I believe it'll be like an instantaneous death. Those that are alive from 1 Corinthians 15, this corruptible body will cease to exist. So in effect, it will die. There will be like a metamorphosis transformation process. This corrupting flesh suit will no longer be. So it will be like a death of this body, but it'll be the most unique death of all time.
Well, yeah, but Paul talks about how some of us will not die, right? That we're going to be transformed.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We won't go to sleep like the normal person is my point, but we're still this body that'll be transformed will essentially... It will die. It will not exist in its current form. It will be transformed and changed. It'll be transformed.
Yep. Yeah.
So in that respect, I believe that there will be like in the twinkling of an eye, that smallest unit of time that Yah created, it will go from corruptible to incorruptible.
I think that's Planck time.
Right? I forget, but they've got it measured out as far as what science.
There's a Planck moment, if you will. It's the smallest divisible that we know of, right? So where is the most holy place in Ezekiel's temple, considering his presence is in the New Jerusalem? So my theory, all right, is there probably wasn't a temple before the fall. That's my take on it. All right. Because God and Adam and Eve could walk in the garden without any issues. Right. There was no compatibility issue. The veil between heaven and earth, this protective membrane, only came about as a result of death, decay, degeneration, and sin. And so then God had to then put up the fence, as it were, so that he could protect us from himself. So, I would suggest that there probably was not a temple, though the garden, in a sense, almost becomes a type of temple because it's an enclosed area. It's a secure space. It's set apart from the rest of the rest of the area, you know. So that may be that it was some kind of a, you know, kind of a walled garden, if you will, and maybe that was kind of the but I don't know. That's a stretch.
Here's a good question. So, will the Zadok priesthood be the ones to bring the sacrifice into the temple for the nations? And we go to Isaiah 66. And again, I believe that there are individuals around the world right now who have no idea that they are Levites. Yah knows who a Levite is. Yah knows who the descendants of Zadok are. I mean, for all we know, it could be some Africans, some Slavs, some Asians, some Europeans, some Native Americans, because it does say he will take Levites and priests from the nations, from the Goyim. And so, you know, he knows your great time 300 granddaddy's lineage. We don't, and we can't prove it.
Right.
So, but
That's
what are
true.
your thoughts on that? Is that it's? I mean, because again, we do know that Zadok, the priesthood narrowed down from the Aaronic line, that narrowed down to the Zadokian line,
Hmm.
and that's one reason that I look at it, the good, the bad, and the ugly with Hanukkah. The good is that they, rebelled against the Greek culture and against the syncretism and adopting Greek philosophy and rolling around naked with men in Greek gyms and all that stuff. That's the wonderful part. But then they immediately said, we don't really care what your word says. We're going to make ourselves priests. So, and we're going to have some political intrigue and some
Yeah.
murder and some bribery. I mean, there's no doubt by the time Yeshua came, the temple system was corrupt. It was just like any other political system. It was corrupt. So, hey, I do have a question for this. Yom Kippurim. Do you believe there will be the Ark of the Covenant, the original Ark of the Covenant in the Ezekiel temple?
I don't, because it says that the glory of the Lord will fill the temple.
Okay.
So I don't think there's going to be a need for the ark. I
Okay.
think the ark was a way to embody God's manifest presence. You know, because remember in the book of Hebrews, it says that Moses was instructed to carefully follow the pattern
The
shown to him,
pattern shown.
right? Because the pattern of what? The heavenly tabernacle or temple, and all of its stuff, its utensils and whatnot. He had to copy those because that was the pattern, and then he had to make a copy down here on earth, right? So if those things are currently in the New Jerusalem, and God is at the heart of this thing, I think that's going to be brought down. I think the temple on earth is yet another instance of God's mercy. He's giving these humans, these mortals, an opportunity to come near to him, to approach him. They can't go in the New Jerusalem until they get their new bodies, but they have the option, and they get to live their lives and go out through the whole earth. You get 1,000 years. I mean, that's a long time for recess, guys. You know, this is a great chance to enjoy life, and you can get, I mean, I don't think we will be in that boat, but other people that have gone through the tribulation, they can have kids, and their kids can have kids, and it's going to be wonderful, and we're going to see how beautiful the world is and all this stuff without Satan, without open rebellion. But there will still be in the human heart the potential
Well,
to
obviously,
say, yeah,
there's a rebellion at the end.
exactly, right, yeah,
Yeshua, yeah, I agree with JS. Yeshua is the ark. All things, including the ark, are in Yeshua or are Yeshua. I mean, again, and that's to your point, being God will fill. It's going to be Yeshua / God.
right,
I don't believe anyone will see the Father in the next stage. I don't think we're going to see an old guy sitting on a throne and a younger 30 something year old looking Jewish man, as in Yeshua. I see no evidence of that in Revelation or anywhere. So
yeah,
like for instance, in that you pulled up the Isaiah passage, or I believe they're seeing Yeshua. sitting on the throne when
Hmm.
they're seeing Yah, because no one has ever seen the Father. I know that was a
Hmm.
vision,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Yah had dinner with Abraham. Jacob saw him. The 70 elders had a covenant meal. Real quick, what do you believe Sukkot is sort of going to be like a wedding type anniversary yearly to celebrate the marriage supper or the fulfillment, and it's also going to be looking back. It'll be looking backwards as a memorial, just like we look back at
Yeah.
Passover now.
Yeah.
We still
Totally. Yeah.
celebrate Passover.
Yep.
We
Yep.
still honor first fruits
Yep.
in Shavuot. I
Hmm.
believe future major things could happen on a Shavuot. I don't believe it's fully fulfilled, but Passover. I think
Yeah.
we can check that one off. Now, other than maybe a beast or an antichrist mimicking, trying to mirror Passover on a future Passover and a
Hmm.
resurrection, maybe 3 days later, something along those lines. But that's not going to be fulfilling. That's going to be a lie, a delusion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I think the feast will still be in play, very much so. As, we have obviously very clear confirmation of that in Zechariah 14, where you have to come up for the Feast of Sukkot. And I also think that Yom Kippur will be the biggie. It's going to be done obviously once a year. It's for the Kippurim, right? It's the kapara, it's the covering that will then cover the mortals who are now on earth. God's general veil between heaven and earth is no longer there. Where did it go? It went away. It rolled up like a scroll when Jesus came back, and that's why he's coming back in flaming fire, and that's why the elements are going to melt with fervent heat, because here comes the king. And anywhere he interacts with planet Earth, it begins to melt under his feet. It cannot withstand such incredible power in its fallen state. And that's why it has to be renewed at the beginning of the millennium, because God himself is going to be here. There's no protective shield to protect the planet, and it is going to be transformed. It may not happen in a second. It may happen as long as the water, the living water touches the planet. Maybe that's how it's healed. So it might take a little while. I don't know. But,
do you think the living water is sort of going to be, and Halissa's done a deep dive on this as far as the four rivers that flowed out of Eden? Can you see that, hey, due to geography or terrain, because again, I think our current topography of the earth is going to be wrecked. And
mm,
so if you had
mhm.
something along the lines of what we see in Eden, maybe when the landmass was one, and
Yeah.
how the
Back to
rivers,
Pangea.
yeah, how the rivers kind of flowed, the four rivers flowed out of the garden. And so I can see that these,
Yeah.
because it does have one to the east. Now there's a sea there now, but again, we don't know what
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
continent or the landmass of Earth
Right.
will look like after after it's been reshuffled.
That's
I,
right.
I, I believe
Yeah.
it's going to be, at a minimum, it's going to be pre-flood atmosphere, if not
Yeah.
like an Edenic type atmosphere.
I would tend to agree with that. I mean, way back when I heard about Pangea, and I did nothing but scoff. I'm like, oh, that's
It all
ridiculous.
fits together like a glove.
you're
Come
you're
on,
you're
man.
but then I was like, wait, it actually talks about the earth being split up in the days of Perez, right?
Yes.
So I'm like, oh, maybe it was. Maybe the timeline needs a little nuancing, but as far as it be being one landmass, yes, why not? And it also says that there was no more sea, right? That's what we saw at the beginning of Revelation
That's
21.
interesting. If all the
Yeah.
land, however he does it, does the sea recede? Does it evaporate? I don't know.
Well,
I mean,
my take on that is that we still have bodies of water, we still have great lakes, as it were, but we don't have the great ocean. Okay, and even though we call it Pacific, Atlantic, it's just one big body of water, right?
yeah,
I mean, you can
we're all connected.
circumnavigate the globe, right? You can take one boat, you don't have to get out, you can just go all the way around. Okay,
Yeah,
uh,
unless you run into ice.
well, there's that, the Titanic, they will definitely tell you that. But otherwise, you can stay in a boat and it fills the whole earth, right?
Yeah,
Just
you
that.
could get to the Baltic from Pensacola if you
Yeah.
wanted to.
Yeah, you could. It'd take you a while, but you can do it. In fact, they're doing it all the time with these, massive ships. That's how they're getting oil. Hello, Straits of Hormuz, right? But that oil is moved all over the world, and it's because there's one big, gigantic, contiguous body of water. All right, and I don't think that was the case before the flood. I think you had localized bodies of water, and I'm sure they were beautiful and they were wonderful, but it wasn't one gigantic body of water, because that water, much of it was under the earth. Okay, it was, we have still aquifers today, and there was just a whole lot more water under the earth. So, yeah, I mean, there's just all kinds of things we can try to
And
figure
Rick
out.
makes a good point too, because the seas are symbolic of the nations. So I do believe, and again, Rick, I do believe there's going to be mortals in the humans in the next stage, in the millennium. They may not be they may not be Israel, because again, I think if we look at those passages like in Ezekiel, I think it's chapter 47 or 40, I forget the exact chapter, but if someone who is a goyim, who is an ethnos, who is of the nations, wants to migrate and become a citizen of Israel, they go, hey, I really like this land of Reuben. This is where I'm going to live, and they'll be just like a native born Reubenite. And so again, and you got the nations. The pre-tribbers always. Have you ever noticed that, or maybe when you were a pre-tribber, did anybody ever confront you with that verse? They said it has to be the Jews because they have to believe in Jesus and they have to populate the millennium. And you've got that verse in Zechariah that says those of the nations that came up against Jerusalem.
Right.
There's going to be survivors. How they survive, I don't know, but Yah knows who He's going to allow to survive and through.
Well, I think that's where Matthew 25 comes in. We often
the sheep and the goats.
Yeah, I think the sheep are the nations, and they don't know Jesus by name.
They're like, who the heck are you?
Yeah, exactly. They're like, he's like, come on in, guys, and they're like, well, wait, Lord, when did we see you? And when did we do all these things to you? Like, we don't remember that. I mean, thanks for the offer, but we don't remember doing that. And he's like, whenever you did to the least of these, my brothers, okay, you did it to me. So they're like, oh, we did the right thing without even realizing it. We were just being good people, and we weren't doing it for religious reasons. This is Romans chapter 2 as well, which does not fit into
naturally doing
Romans road theology, salvation kind of message, because it says that the Gentiles, the ethnos that don't have the law, but do the things that are required of the law, it becomes a law unto itself, and these are justified. And it's like, wow, okay. So, I mean, I grew up on this whole idea that, everybody if you haven't said the prayer, you're going to hell. I mean, that's what I was raised on, man. Like, if you haven't invited Jesus into your heart as your Lord and Savior, and you made sure that you said it, you're going to hell. And that was
even if you have said it, we're all going to Sheol / hell.
Well, I know, but you know what we were talking about. The burning place forever and ever.
I've started just to use the term lake of fire, and again, the scripture says that there's a second resurrection. It does. Again, you want everyone to place their faith and trust in Yeshua, their biblical faith, not just hey, I've got an intellectual belief or whatever, but there's not much repentance in your life. Again, not on the throne, but you want to be part of that first resurrection, not necessarily the second resurrection. But it does not say that everyone that's resurrected in the second resurrection is tossed into the lake of fire.
Yeah.
The text does not say that. It doesn't say that everybody that is resurrected goes to the eternal state. So again, I think that's, you want to be part of the first resurrection, not the second resurrection.
Amen to that.
I'm not preaching to, hey, just wing it and be a nice person and rely on the second resurrection and the great white throne judgment. That's not what I'm advocating.
Right. I mean, we definitely want to seek out the kingdom of God. We've just made it so much that we have our circles, And if you're in my circle, what I consider to be the right circle of faith, then you're saved. If you're not in the circle, then you're totally lost. And I just think it's the wrong perspective. I think more it's more like we've got Jesus here, and we're all, those of us that at least walking toward Jesus, we're on kind of this different path, and some of us are closer, and some of us are further away. Some of us are, we're still discovering it, and it's a different way to look at our journey toward Jesus. Instead of we got our circle of faith, and you've got to be inside the circle. God is gracious. That's the cool thing.
There's a
And
good
somebody,
tri-
yeah.
I put this up here just because that is one of my pet peeves, because Revelation specifically says, do not add to the words of this book. And
Mm,
every pre-trib teacher and every person that's been indoctrinated into it will always add tribulation saints. I'm like, don't
yeah,
do that.
yeah, yeah.
That's not what the text says. It says the saints. To quit,
Hmm.
don't add and don't teach it that way. Here's one. So, are you saying the temple in Revelation 11? I believe that's what you were saying, Doug. Is the heavenly temple, or is it an earthly temple during the tribulation? The outside courts get trampled by Gentiles. And Doug and I differ on this, but I believe you think it's a third temple built by Judah, correct?
Well, at the beginning of Revelation 11, I would suggest that it's a temple built by Judah, probably, but I will fully confess it is a little bit tricky right there, because he has these dimensions. It's an angel that's measuring this thing. Is that talking about simply an earthly temple? Very possibly. Is it talking about the spiritual? Well, it could be too. Okay, but I
Because
know
he
that at
does
the end of
use
the
naos.
chapter, it's very much talking about where God is. Okay, um, so
And I
yeah.
look at Revelation 11 as it says naos. If it had used the Greek term hieron, and I'm butchering the Greek as I do the Hebrew, but if it used the term for a brick and mortar temple, then I don't think there would be any discussion. Is this a rebuilt temple built by Judah, still in unbelief, starting up their sacrifices and rejecting Yeshua as the offering of himself? Or is it talking about the body, the body of Messiah? And so
Mhm.
I definitely lean that direction.
Yeah,
It could be a both and, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
So because it says, trampled by the nations, and Doug and I now understand that, our bodies are the temple and we are Israel. And I believe true Israel is going to get trampled on
Mm,
by the nations during the Great Tribulation.
mhm.
So I don't think we're in any disagreement on that. So if you do look at it, and again, I can show the verses. Yeshua says his body's the temple. Paul calls our
Mhm,
bodies the temple,
mhm.
and they use
Yep.
the term naos for that as opposed to Huron. You know, the Spirit now resides in us. So we are that temple. But we'll have to see how it all plays out here in the next maybe yearish to 6ish years, or I'm just my understanding is incorrect.
Uh, you know, I was doing a little research on the end of the petrodollar, and I'll tell you what, I don't know when Jesus is coming back, but the end of the American empire could be coming a lot faster than any of us, um,
Oh,
you know.
oh, 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 you blaspheme the orange man. He is playing 7D chess, Doug.
Mm,
He's got
mm,
this, he's just
mhm. Sure.
everything, he's going to make America great again. And he's going to heal the nations because
Well, we saw the
he's
meme, didn't we?
he's a doctor.
Oh my gosh. I just don't know what to say about that. But
Yeah, you
yeah,
have a lot to say. You just don't want to.
that's true. Well, I already ruffled a few feathers earlier this week, and
So, yeah, I just don't care because I'm not a Kamala supporter, a Democrat, or a Republican. If politics upsets you, you're guilty of engaging in the leaven of the Herodians, the leaven of Herod. Just hey, pray for our leaders. We should pray for Trump. We should have prayed for Biden. Not that he was, not that he knew what was going on. You know,
he did for a little while. Then
yeah,
he kind of
maybe for a couple of months.
Yeah.
So,
Well, awesome, man. All right. Well, we will get into Revelation 22 next week. Yeah.
look, this
Yeah.
is interesting.
Yeah.
I've never thought of this. What if the Revelation 11 temple is part of the heavenly temple that is lowered to earth, the daily of Daniel 8? And the reason
Mm,
the the reason I differ with,
mm,
like, say, Nelson and the pre-wrath people, where they're doing this 2,300-day count, or either they take the daily and they split it in two and come up with 1150. It
mhm,
appears this entity, this is actually rising to the hosts of heaven.
mm.
Something's happening in the heavenlies as opposed to an earthly temple.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it happens at the very end of the age. So, maybe
Yeah.
that's, could you
I,
see the
I,
temple?
yeah.
Could you see, again, I'm not saying I adhere to this, but I'm spitballing. Could you see that if the New Jerusalem started to appear, didn't come all the way
Mm,
down, that could be one of the signs in the heavens causing men's hearts to fail? And maybe that's some of the disclosure stuff. Because I heard
mm,
recently one of the
mm,
disclosures is going to be there is a ship
mm,
coming,
mm,
and don't believe that lie. That's not the truth. There's not. But if
mm.
can you imagine if once the veil's ripped open and New Jerusalem starts to descend and it can be seen, uh, it would freak people out.
Indeed. Indeed. That's a really interesting concept. And think about this. See, I'm not so sure that an average human could see that, but if you have taken the mark of the beast, or if you are the beast, okay, then you can see into that realm. And I think in Daniel chapter 8, where he's going to ascend to the heavenly host and he's going to knock some to the ground, and he's going to ascend as high as the prince of the host. I think the prince of the host is Michael. And this is what Revelation 12 tells us, that Michael and his angels and Satan and his angels get into a bit of a scuffle. And basically, I think what Satan's going to do, this is what happens to every psychotic, bad guy. They start getting some cred, they start getting some traction, and then they go too far, right? They overstep their boundaries, whether it's a physical boundary or a legal boundary, right? They had the perfect plan and then they blew it because they got too big for their britches. So Satan is going to get the world under the covenant of death, and he will do it legally, even though it's quite shrewd, but it will be legal. And the world will sign on to his little document, whatever, and say, okay, we want the covenant of death. And then he thinks that he's so hot to trot. And now, he's then combined with the beast. He is now saying, hey, not only is the earth mine, but the heavens are mine too. And I think this is where he's going to ascend in a spiritual, maybe physical sense. He will ascend into that spiritual realm. And that's when he crosses a legal line and he gets cast back down to earth because he
Yeah.
overstepped his boundaries.
This is the JT. If you ever want to join us sometime for a guest, you have great questions and insights. Just email Doug or I. But yeah, this is the best explanation I've ever heard for Daniel 8, because none of this is going to happen in a rebuilt third temple makes any sense to me. And because it does say he ascends, like it's up in the heavenlies. So
Mm-hmm.
again, if we're gonna, and I'm no Hebrew scholar, but at least all the translations pretty much interpret it the same way, that it's not happening here in
Right.
a rebuilt
Right.
temple by Judah. And
Right.
so, yeah, he thinks he'll be part of the temple of heaven that the little horn desecrates and throws it to earth. And perhaps as a result of that desecration, he gets thrown to earth. It's like, Yah's
Right.
like, you're kicked out now. And again,
Yeah.
in Revelation,
Yeah.
we see
Yep.
that he is no longer able to accuse the brethren like he did in Job before the
Mm-hmm.
throne.
Right.
So he's thrown down. It says, "Woe to you on earth, because the devil, the serpent," well, I forget the exact language used,
Mm-hmm.
has come to earth, and he's not happy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you pair Daniel 8 and Revelation 12, I think they're talking about the same thing. And you pair 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where the one who has been, withholding, resisting, standing in the way, it's not the Holy Spirit, it's Michael. Okay. And he's going to get basically bumped. He's not going to be the guardian of Israel anymore. It's now going to be a new sheriff in town, which is Satan, and the whole world is going to sign this covenant of death with him. And so now Satan's thinking he's pretty darn cool. So he grew as high as the heavenly host, made some of the stars and some of the host fall to the earth and trample them. It made itself great, even up to the prince of the host, Michael. It removed his daily sacrifice and overthrew the place of his sanctuary. Because the rebellion of hosts together with the daily sacrifice will be given over to the horn, will throw truth to the ground and will be successful in whatever he does. All right, so then now let's go to Revelation 12. All right, and so the war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought. He could not prevail, and there was no place found for them any longer. So the great dragon was thrown out, the ancient serpent and devil. All right, and then we have, of course, the same thing. And now it says that there's stars that are going to be cast to the earth, right? And then it says, yeah, he comes down. The dragon saw they'd been thrown to the earth. He persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle so she could fly from the serpent's presence.
Sort of like an Exodus.
Right. Yep. And he's pretty ticked. The dragon was furious with the woman and left to wage war against the rest of her offspring. And of course, we're told in Daniel that he's going to overcome the saints. He's going to war against them and overcome them. And only at the very end, when their power is broken, that is when a judgment is made in favor of the saints.
Yep. And I'll put this up here because I know it's, it goes against everything that I learned growing up in dispensationalism. But again, I have went to now looking at this, as more that we are the temple, we are the naos. And again, Paul uses the term naos. Now, I do understand that how is Satan going to stand in our bodies or something, but I do believe that's part of his ultimate goal, is to, per your theory and understanding, Doug, that he literally wants to kind of put his little spark DNA or whatever and change us into something not human. And so he's going to try to deceive even the elect, if possible, and get them to believe this lie, this delusion. And God's going to give people over to it. And again, the danger with the pre-trib doctrine is some of them have been so indoctrinated into it that when they don't get raptured and the mark of the beast is implemented, they're going to either think, Yah lied to them, either they're going to reject scripture. I've heard this out of Jan Markell's mouth. I've heard this out of like J.D. Farrak's mouth. I've heard this out of these teachers. Mm-hmm. Or they're going to go, this cannot be the mark. This cannot be the Great Tribulation because the church is still here. That's the danger in this. Mm-hmm. And again, I would rather err on this. I would rather err on the side of warning about something more spiritual than a literal temple. Mm-hmm. Because we have to admit that this is fairly new as far as, this understanding of dispensationalism. It's a fairly, by no means am I saying trust what the 3rd or 4th century early church not fathers wrote as gospel. They had a lot of wackadoodle stuff too, but there's just a lot of garbage in the 2 Christian systematic theologies. Mm-hmm. One being replacement theology and allegorize away everything, the other being only the Jews. And so, I mean, again, I agree with JT that I don't think Paul, because he knew the temple was going to be judged, I don't think he would be calling a future temple, which is denying God, denying Yeshua as the temple of Elohim. So I know there's a counter argument to that.
I mean, I know what you're saying. I get it, but you did have in Ezekiel's day, you had the temple of God, and it was being utterly abused and filled with all kinds of creepy crawlies and things on the walls. And, they were making cakes to the Queen of Heaven. They're weeping for Tammuz, all in the temple itself. And that was the temple of God until God finally left, right? So, and it says in 2 Thessalonians that he will go into the temple of God and he will declare himself to be God and show himself to be God.
But does he actually says the naos. So again, I can see, like, for instance, Yeshua says, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the Hagios Topos, I believe he will. I'm not saying there's not going to be a temple built. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're not going to or do a tabernacle or start altars. I believe it will be in Jerusalem, where the beast declares himself to be Elohim, the Elohim of Elohims. So I believe that part of it is because everything's going to center and focus on Jerusalem. And so whether or not, my concern is, I think the abomination could start when they start the sacrifices based on Isaiah. And if I'm wrong, I'm just wrong. But because that would be easily go, okay, my understanding of Isaiah, if things don't start going to Hades in a handbasket quickly, like within a day or a couple of months or a year, then I might shift back to more of a understanding that I don't have right now that I used to have. I'm be willing to be flexible is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So, I think what makes a physical place on the Temple Mount, why I think that's still very important. It's not the structure. All right. That's really a big deal that we need to understand. It's not the structure. It's the nexus. There's a location. There's a connection between heaven and earth. That's what made it amazingly special. Okay. And in the first temple period, in the first temple period, God himself, his presence went in there. And we don't know about the second temple period, but still it was a connection point between God and heaven. Okay. And between God and earth. Right. And so I think that location is still very significant. Whatever the edifice itself is going to be, I think is rather secondary. It's a tent, it's made of bricks, whatever, who cares? But it's that location. And so when the Antichrist, the beast, goes into that specific location, that Hagios Telpios, and then he says that I am God, I think he's giving God the middle finger. He's blaspheming God and those who dwell in heaven. If he had said it in South America, that's one thing. But now he's in God's territory, God's neighborhood, right? This is God's special place.
Where Yah put his name, and we're in 100% agreement on that. I believe it will occur in Jerusalem on what, again, I don't get into where was the Temple Mount arguments, but I believe it's located where the Dome of the Rock currently is. That's the threshing floor. I mean, I wouldn't stake my kingdom status on it, but I believe that's where things will happen. I mean, and it could happen. I'm not an Islam Antichrist person, but if someone were to, all of a sudden you got a false prophet doing miracles and signs and wonders, and you've got, this is your God, and this person declares that, he is the God and defiles and defames. The location is holy. It's being defamed right now. There's an ongoing abomination on the Temple Mount right now. It's been ongoing since 600-ish AD.
Yeah, sure.
And it's sort of like, those people that think we're in the little season theory, I guess Yah just didn't mind the fact that the Dome of the Rock was there in Jerusalem all this time. Maybe Yeshua built it. I mean, it's insane.
So what I've looked at is, why is Satan trying to do anything that he's trying to do? And I remember hearing for years, Satan knows that he's already lost, and he's just trying to take as many people down with him as he can. I think that is nuts. I think that's stupid. I think it's lazy, honestly. I think Satan is incredibly intelligent. He, he cannot see the future, but he can certainly prognosticate. He can see trends. He can influence. And he's got a plan. And you know what? He's read the Bible too. Okay. He's read the Bible. So he's seen at least the general skeleton of how this thing's going to turn out. And The only weapon that Satan has ever had against God is a legal standing. That's it. He cannot out arm wrestle God. He doesn't have bigger weapons or rockets or missiles or anything. No space lasers, no Death Star. He just has a legal claim. So when God made the heavens and the earth and he gives the keys to Adam, and then Satan, as we already discussed, was there and he said, "Hey, can I have those keys?" And Adam's like, "Sure, here you go." Right? He lost the keys. He lost the authority. He lost the tablet of destinies, as it was called in the ancient world. Jesus came back to buy those keys back. And then after his resurrection, he says, "Hey, look what I got." Isn't that cool? Right? So he had to buy those. Well, so what is Satan going to do in the future? Well, we're told that he's going to make a covenant of death with the world. And guys, this is why I've, as we were going through the book of Revelation, I had us stop and take a look here at the fourth horseman. Look at this. It's incredible. When he opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." And I looked, and there was a pale green horse. The horseman on it was named Death, and Hades was following after him. Authority was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill by the sword, by famine, by plague, and by the wild animals of the earth. Okay, so this is where, God bless a lot of our brothers, there's like, "Oh, so he's going to kill a fourth of the earth." That's not what it says. That's not what it says. He's given authority over a fourth of the planet. Well, which fourth? That's the question. Okay, if we're talking geography, which fourth? Well, a study was done by Tobler et al. In 1999, and they figured out that humanity lives on 25.4% of Earth's surface area. And that blew my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. 25.4%. That's where humans live on the planet. There you go. Boom, right there. All right. So death and Hades is the same dynamic duo that we find in Isaiah 28, where it says, we've cut a deal with death, and we are in agreement with Sheol. Okay, look, there it is. Okay, so death and Sheol, death and Hades, that's the same thing. One is Greek, one is Hebrew. But death, who is death? Well, this is where I show in, again, this is Encrypting the Image, Volume 3. If you want to dig deeper, it's in there that Gog is a Sumerian word for Goog. I just put a video out on this. If you guys want to check it out, it's on Facebook. But Goog or Gog means death or enmity. Death or enmity. Wow. Okay. So they were going to make a deal with death, aka Satan. And Sheol, the underworld, as it were, is going to come along for the ride. Okay. And so then we go to Revelation chapter 9, and you got this star having fallen from heaven to earth. He gets the key to the abyss. I submit to you that this Abaddon is another name for death. That's my take on it. We can argue about that another day. But I think this one, this king of the abyss, aka the underworld, Sheol, his name is Abaddon, the destroyer, Apollyon, the destroyer, death. I think they're the same. And so then all these really scary creatures come out of Sheol, abyss. So whether it's Sheol, Hades, the bottomless pit, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same general place. And the world is going to make a covenant with them, and they're going to then have authority over the earth. That's why when we went to Revelation 13, everyone's amazed. They worshiped the dragon because he gave authority, there's that word, to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who's like the beast? Who's able to make war against him?" His mouth was given to him to speak boasts and blasphemy. He was also given authority to act for 42 months. Who's giving the authority? I do not think that it's God. I've heard that. Oh, God's giving him the authority. I say nonsense. I think it's humanity that is giving him the authority to do those things. God is trying to warn people, saying, don't do it. He sends the two witnesses. Don't give in to this guy. Don't listen to him. The world says, we don't want to listen to you. and they make the deal anyway. And when that
He's
happens,
allowed. Yeah, yeah.
that's when Michael is now out of a job. There's a divorce that happens. That's the apostasy that Paul spoke of, because Michael, the one who restrains, is going to be legally made to stand down, and Satan will be given the authority.
Well, and in that covenant with death, that chapter, you do see. I see this. The house of Israel, those that don't even realize it, because again, that passage is not just to Judah. So I see a lot of people that profess to be Christians that are going to be deceived by this. And again, Yah is allowing this, but those people are going to choose, as you're pointing out, they're going to choose the lie. Comparing this passage, comparing the covenant of death passage with 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And Yah is going to give them over so that they believe the lie. In other words, so it's going to look good. Where I would differ is I don't see the demon bugs and the fifth trumpet being part of how Satan is going to allure people into this covenant of death. I think that's way on down the road.
No, I agree with you. I don't think that's part of the allure. I think that's once the
that's
ink
not
is
very
dry,
enticing.
once the ink is dry, then they're like, oh crap, we didn't know about these. We didn't know these guys were in the deal. But
well, and again, it's not just those who have taken the mark that are going to get tormented. I believe this is the last 5 months of this age, the fifth trumpet.
Yeah.
And it analogizes well with the flood being 5 months. And I believe that it leads right into Yom Teruah. Like, in other words, at the end of that 5 months, I believe that's going to be Yom Teruah. And then, you have the sixth trumpet and then all the bowls of wrath. And again, me and Sam keep going back. I said, Sam, we only differ by 1 year and 2 days. You just believe that that the bowls can't be poured out in 10 days. And I believe they can.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. Yeah. And this is where we go back to Revelation is not chronologically laid out. Okay. It comes and it goes and it recapitulates and then it states it again. And, it's thematically driven. It's not chronologically driven. And once we can appreciate that, then, we still have to decide how to connect the dots so that we can make sense of it in our brains. But don't be so stuck on, I'm not talking to you, but just all of us in general, that, it's not a chronologically arranged book. And that's caused a lot of confusion. I want to take this comment by Rick. And I know that Scott and I see the Magen David a little bit differently, but that's even beside the issue. The covenant of death signed in 1947 by the Star of Remphan, it's not true. All right. So I want to make this very, very clear. Whether you guys like the Star of David or you don't, that's another discussion. But the Star of David, the six-pointed star, is not what was being referred to by Stephen. Okay. He was talking about the 8-pointed star. That was the star of the god Molech. And you can read about that in Amos chapter 5. There is no star of Remphan. That is simply a linguistic anomaly. Okay. And unfortunately, it would seem that our Greek text did not copy that properly. It mixed up the kaf and the resh. And so, because it's talking about the star Kivun, and probably what happened is the kaf that is shaped like this, like a backward C, if you don't bring it down all the way, right? Just kind of like in English, that C, if you don't bring your C all the way down, you can kind of make it into an R. Okay. And that's essentially what happened. I'm oversimplifying, but that's basically what happened. And so instead of what was talked about, and this god was Molech, who was also known as Nimrod. Okay. Nimrod becomes Nisroch. Again, this is in Corrupting the Image Volume 2, if you guys want to check all that out. But there is no star Remphan. Okay. And whatever you think about,
I just look at it as it's occultic, and you've got Christianity with their sunbursts everywhere. You've got Islam with their moon, and you have Judaism with its star.
I personally am fine with the 6-pointed star. I'm personally fine with it.
But again, we're not.
And I
We have to
understand.
have
I
those
know. I
images.
know. I know we see it differently, but I just want to make it clear that there is no star of Remphan. Remphan is a linguistic anomaly. There was no god Remphan. So I just encourage that to be, taken out of our vocabulary, because it's
Well,
not
I
at
will
all
say
accurate.
this, that it's part of Yah's plan was to allow Judah to come back to the land. Okay,
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
believe that. I
Yeah.
believe there are some. If Epstein was not part of the synagogue of Satan, I don't know who is. He claimed to be Jewish. By no means, from what we know about the man, that would
Yeah.
be an example of someone
Yeah.
that was Jewish. That is no doubt part of the synagogue of Satan. So, and there are
Yeah.
some, and he may not be Jewish. There are some
Mhm.
that, but again, what happens is you paint a broad brush, and I
Yeah.
rarely ever see a middle ground here. I rarely
Yeah.
ever see,
Yeah.
a Romans 11 approach that look,
Yeah.
or a Zechariah 12 approach. And so, but I do agree that Christian Zionism and the way they have elevated Judah to God's chosen people, like you're chosen too if you're in Messiah. That's just utter nonsense to elevate Judah. That's what ends up happening. You either have people elevating Judah, or you have them saying Judah has no role in the redemptive plan, and they're all part of the synagogue of Satan. You rarely ever
Right.
see
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah, you got the good, the bad, the ugly. There's no doubt about it. But again, what Stephen was talking about was not the 6-pointed star. He was not talking about Rafan. There is no Rafan. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Yeah, Sakut, Molech. Again, I detail it all in Corrupting the Image Volume 2 if you want to take a deep dive into that. But I would just be very, very careful, because I think when you start painting with a broad brush, and you start saying that all the Jews are
No,
part of the
not
covenant of God.
all.
No, that's wrong. It's wrong, and
But
I think we
some
should
are
never say
no
that.
doubt rolling over in bed just making love with Satan. I mean, there is Frankism, there is Sabbateism,
Sure.
there is
Yes.
cultic
Of course.
Kabbalah. I
Of
mean,
course.
I know enough about
Yeah.
the Kabbalah to know that it's straight from the lake of fire. It is straight from Satan. It's evil. There are some things in Judaism that are just flat out evil, just like there's some things in Roman Catholicism that are flat out evil. I mean, there's a lot of things about both religions, and that's why we're to come out of her. Yeah, I mean, like Rick says, the 5-pointed stars, the 8-pointed stars, the 6-pointed stars. What part is so hard to understand for both religions, Judaism and Christianity?
Yeah, I mean, part of the difference, though, to be fair, is that the 5-pointed star, by those who adhere to it, it is representative of Satan, and they embody the principles and values of Satan by and
Uh,
large.
you start studying
Whereas,
the
the
history, and
average Jew who is using the 6-pointed star, or messianic synagogues, if you will, that have that as a representative, they're not in any way trying to follow the god Saturn or Sikut or Molech,
unless
or any
they're
of that stuff.
in the like uber Kabbalah, man, that stuff's pure evil. I mean, it is
Well,
witchcraft. It is
yeah,
Jewish witchcraft. It's Jewish sorcery, and you do see the star in there. And the star was never used as a symbol until the Middle Ages. It was never used as a symbol. Yes, it's on the temple
I
in
know, but
Capernaum,
you're missing
and
the
right
point.
next to a swastika.
I know, but you're still
So
missing
it's
the
a
point.
cultic. It's in the
But
cult symbol.
but you're still missing the point that he
No,
was
I'm
saying
not making the point.
that well,
I'm
my
not saying
point.
it's a Star of
Yeah,
Remphan. I'm saying it's an
okay.
occult symbol that should not be used. Period.
I know where you stand on that, and I think we strongly disagree on that one. But whatever, in Acts 7, it's not the star of Remphan, and it's definitely not the 6-pointed star. So, wow, oh my gosh, so much stuff here. We got through a lot.
Yep.
Guys, next week we'll get into Revelation 22. I have a new book coming out in May. I've got Immortal Dawn. I'm pretty darn excited about that. I also have a book that came out this month. It's called Set Free: What the Bible Really Teaches About Divorce and Remarriage. Check it out. I'm not encouraging people to get divorced, but I'm also trying to bring to light what the Bible actually says about it. and it's better than what a lot of us have heard. It's more balanced. There's a lot of grace, and there's definitely some serious
Well,
stuff too.
the main
But
thing is
yeah,
it's not a complicated study, Doug. Just study the two different Greek words for divorce and put away wife. One's still a wife, one's a divorced and no longer a wife. It's not that complicated.
yeah,
But
yeah. Well, it's on Amazon, guys. Check it out, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Scott, I'll see you next week, my friend.
see you, man.
All right. God bless
Y'all
everyone.
have a good one.
All right.